Hello, friends. Welcome back to ABN's Trinity channel for another episode of Islam and the News. Today is Friday, March 9th, in the year of our Lord, 2018. And as always, it's a blessing to be joined by people around the world through satellite, through high-speed internet, and of course on many internet-based devices as well. If you're not sure about all of the different ways you can watch this show live, just go to trinitychannel.com/platforms. And you can see a list of many different devices that you can watch on, including, again, satellite if you're in North America, if you're in the Middle East, if you're in North Africa, if you're in Australia or New Zealand. But of course, if you have high-speed internet, you can get it on just about any device out there, whether you have a desktop, laptop, iPad, Apple, Android devices, Amazon Fire Stick, Apple TV, all kinds of platforms. And of course, if you're just tuning in via internet on your computer, we want to welcome you as well. We're so thankful for you letting more and more people know about your Islamic news source, Islam and the News, found only on ABN's Trinity channel. And of course, here every single week, I cover the news that you will not get ever in the mainstream media, and especially not the commentary, the history, the theology, the philosophy, and everything else that is never talked about in the mainstream media, because guess who they call? They always call CAIR, the Council on American Islamic Relations, to come and talk about anything that has to do with Islam. But of course, you're going to get a very biased source if you call them, and we'll be talking about them in this episode, like many other episodes that we always do. But again, we're so thankful for your prayers and your support, and please continue to pray for us. Please support this ministry financially that allows all of the weekly shows to continue, and this is just one of them. If you're not aware of all the other weekly shows that we do, just go to trinitychannel.com. You can see all the English shows at least, but we also have other shows as well in Arabic, Aramaic, Kurdish, and the list goes on. Getting here right to the news, I have from Fars News, breaking news. This is an armed men raid Iranian embassy in London. This story just came out about 4 hours ago, so we don't have a whole lot of details on it. But it says early reports said that the raiders are 4 men who have opened their way into the embassy premises while threatening people on the scene with machetes and baseball bats. The London police have reportedly deployed around the embassy, but took no action in the first couple of hours after the attack. The slogans chanted by the raiders indicate that they are members of Sadek Shirazi Shiite extremist sect, supported by London. Iran's ambassador to Britain, Hamid Badinejad, confirmed the reports on the embassy attack minutes ago. It says here, quote, "A few followers of Shirazi have attacked the Islamic Republic of Iran's embassy in London and broke the flag mast." The ambassador tweeted minutes ago and added that the raiders are, quote, chanting slogans against Iranian officials. He further confirmed that the raiders were carrying sticks and machetes, and police are deployed on the scene. The Shirazi sect that has been labeled as British Shiism by the Iranian supreme leader operates mainly from London. The sect also runs a satellite network called Fadak from London and promotes Shiite extremism against Sunni Islam. The sect is also known to be the religious opposition of the Islamic Republic. Meanwhile, Iranian Foreign Ministry spokesperson Bahram Qasemi told FNA that, quote, "We are investigating into the case, and we keep in contact with the Iranian embassy in London and the British embassy in Tehran. The British government is duty-bound to seriously and decisively fulfill its responsibility to protect the Islamic Republic of Iran's diplomats and diplomatic centers and immediately arrest and prosecute those who have trespassed the diplomatic sanctuary," the spokesperson reiterated. Speaking of Iran, I have here from our friend Leo Hohmann, who again wrote a great book that you need to pick up, probably one of the most important books published in 2017, and that is called it's on the stealth invasion, and just look that up on Amazon or any other place where you buy books. But here I have from Leo Hohmann, has Trump administration betrayed Iran's persecuted Christian minorities? The rejection of asylum for about 100 Iranian Christian refugees by the Trump administration is raising eyebrows among advocates for the persecuted church in Islamic nations. Now, this is a story I just talked about. I believe it was last week, maybe 2 weeks ago at the most. This is the latest here, though. It says one advocacy group, Barnabas Aid, has gone so far as to call the rejected asylum applications, quote, an insult to America's Christian and humanitarian heritage and a betrayal by the Trump administration. The Christian refugees, many of whom can recount horrific stories of persecution they've experienced at the hands of Iranian mullahs, now have less than a week to leave Austria, where they have been stranded for more than a year, unwanted by the Europeans and other formerly Christian countries. They had expected to be given entry to the United States under the so-called Lautenberg program, named after former New Jersey Senator Frank Lautenberg, but now face potential deportation back to Iran. And of course, this doesn't line up with how many people are, in fact, coming here. And of course, that's something else we're going to get to later as well. The decision by the Trump administration to reject the applicants, it says here, quote, is a betrayal of Iranian Christian refugees, the UK-based Barnabas Aid stated in an alerted post on its website. Before he even announced his candidacy, Trump promised to be a voice and a vehicle to help Christians around the world. The Christians are being treated horribly because we have nobody to represent the Christians, Trump told CBN's David Brody. Believe me, if I run and I win, I'll be the greatest representative of the Christians they've had in a long time. After he took office in January 2017, Trump sat down for another interview with Brody and told him persecuted Christians would be given priority over the refugees. And of course, the refugees is what I'll be talking about here. I don't know, maybe someone has some misinformation here. Maybe Trump hasn't been told who these people are, where they're coming from, or what. So hopefully some better communication goes on, because this doesn't sound like what the Trump administration's been doing if you follow all the news that I present here on Islam in the News every single week. So definitely a group to be praying for in this situation. Speaking of Iran, I have here from CNS News, Iran breaks up women's protest as Khamenei extols hijab, deplores Western nudity, quote unquote. International Women's Day in Tehran saw reports of police breaking up a protest by a group of women on the same day as Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei extolled the virtues of covered-up Muslim women in contrast to those in the West, where, quote, the female role is her nudity. A group of women holding placards calling for equal and fair wages for women and saying no to gender-based discrimination gathered outside the labor ministry, according to the exiled opposition group National Council of Resistance of Iran, that's NCRI. Security forces, plainclothes security agents, and female agents of the regime had been stationed in the area on alert before the gathering started, it said. To prevent the formation of the gathering and disperse the crowd, they viciously attacked the participants and brutalized them with batons and shockers. At least 20 women were arrested. Elsewhere, Khamenei was meeting with an audience of eulogists from the Alubite University and referred for the first time in public to a recent series of demonstrations by women who have removed their hijabs on the street to protest the forced wearing of the Islamic head covering. And that is why, of course, it is completely ridiculous or beyond ridiculous to see women in the West, whether it's the United States, you know, up in Canada or wherever in the West, if you're not living under Sharia, to put it on for solidarity with women. It's like, okay, there you go to other countries, you get arrested for taking it off. You go to prison. You're not having solidarity. You know, you're not having solidarity by putting on something that definitely does oppress women in other countries. Of course, here in the West, you don't get the education. You don't study Islam for yourself. You hear these watered down stories about how the hijab ennobles women and all this stuff, because Muslims who you've talked to are pointing to Khadijah, Muhammad's pre-Islamic wife, the first wife that he had, the business owner who was an independent woman. But guess what? He was married to her before he had the first visitation from Jibreel. So people don't ever point to his other wives and say, oh, the hijab gives you solidarity with women or it ennobles women. It's Khadijah. And you actually find a show that we did on that. It was myself and Beth Grove from Fander Center, Dr. J. Smith's ministry, and then also Rocky Nasser, a former Muslim. And it was called Hadijah, Muhammad's pre-Islamic wife. You can find that on the Trinity Channel's YouTube channel, also my Vimeo channel, vimeo.com/Tony Groulet. Now, another picture that I have here for you in relation to this news story is this next picture, which lets you know what has happened in Iran since before the Ayatollah came into power. When all of a sudden it came under Sharia. Yes, this is, if you look at any pictures, like in the early 70s, you actually see women who weren't wearing hijabs, weren't completely covered up in burqas or anything else. Yes, they looked like women in the West, but guess what? You live under Sharia, or you live in a place that all of a sudden comes under Sharia. Well, then laws change, because Sharia is God's law, supposedly. A law is law, not the Yahweh of the Bible, but the Allah of the Quran. And we see that this is implemented in any countries that are under Sharia. Speaking of Iran, I have another news story out of there. Christian Retreat Center ordered to close by tomorrow. And yes, this news story came out today. So this is referring to tomorrow. A Christian Retreat Center in Iran will finally close tomorrow, the 10th of March, nearly 3 years after it was ordered to do so, and then later accused of being funded by the USA's CIA spy agency. The caretakers of the Sharon Retreat Center in Karaj, west of Tehran, have been ordered to vacate the property and hand it over to the executive headquarters from Imam's directives, presided over by Iran's Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. The confiscation of the property, which has been owned by the Council of Assemblies of God, churches in Iran since the early 1970s, was ordered by a revolutionary court on the 21st of July 2015, but the process has taken nearly 3 years to come into effect. The Iranian revolutionary court system is designed to try those suspected of serious crimes, such as trying to overthrow the government, blaspheming against Islam, or inciting violence. Yes, that blasphemy of Islam, of course, is another thing that you can't do if you live under Sharia, or if you just self-impose Islamic laws on yourself, not saying something because you may offend someone, then of course this is going to be the same viewpoint that you have as well. But of course, every single week I'm usually talking about what's happening with ISIS, the latest news stories about them. Well, this here is about the cubs of the caliphate, rehabilitating Islamic State's child fighters. It says here, while children who have been through war typically draw devastating pictures of the violence they have suffered, few show themselves as the perpetrators. The suicide belts, car bombs, and other explosives sketched against again and again by a 14-year-old boy newly arrived at this camp in northern Iraq are the ones he built himself, used by Islamic State militants against civilians and troops in Iraq and Syria. One image depicted him killing a man with a spray of bullets, something he said he did during 3 years as a child fighter, forcibly conscripted by the Islamic State. Kidnapped from his Yazidi homeland in northern Iraq, he said he got used to the sound of bombs falling on Islamic State's de facto capital, Raqqa, in Syria, as security forces closed in last year. Here's where I got shot fighting the SDF, said the boy, not named to protect him from retribution, referring to the U.S.-backed rebel Syrian Defense Forces and pointing out a bullet wound on his shin. Giving him time to draw and talk about his experience is part of a treatment program to help him move on and protect both him and others from lasting damage. Hundreds of children are estimated to have been used as fighters by the Islamic State, including boys who joined with their families or were given up by them, and the offspring of foreign fighters groomed from birth to perpetuate its ideology. Experts have warned that indoctrinated children who began escaping the clutches of the Islamic State as its territory fractured last year could pose an ongoing threat to security, both regionally and in the West, if they are not rehabilitated. Treating Yazidi children who were separated from their families and in many cases orphaned holds particular challenges. Now, of course, there are a lot more details in the story. You can find that at this is a Syrian International News Agency. But also speaking of ISIS, now this is a news story. I have a couple of pictures here of Islam in the News from February 16th, because this is the exact show when I talked about this news story originally. If you were a loyal viewer of Islam in the News, you remember me talking about this back on February 16th, I'm sorry, of this year. So not too long ago, less than a month, talking about this school in Utah where this Islamic State flag was put up, and then there was spray paint on the walls. And this news story that I have here is the latest update on this. People back, less than a month ago were saying, hey, this wasn't anything with ISIS. This is actually just like a prank or whatever else. We have another picture here with this as well, number 5.1. But here is the latest, and this is from Creeping Sharia. It says, Utah, ISIS-inspired teen tried to blow up high school, raised ISIS flags weeks earlier. That weeks earlier is those pictures that you just saw that happened on February 16th of this year. Now, back in February, cops in Utah stated, following hours of investigation, including analysis by federal agents, police have determined the flag swap was not executed by the infamous terrorist group. Now, it says here, nope, just one of its aspiring members. Cops across the U.S. simply refuse to understand the threat. A male high school student has been arrested for manufacturing, possessing, and attempting to use a weapon of mass destruction after Pineview High students spotted a suspicious backpack on campus. St. George Police Department officers also believe the suspect is connected to vandalizing Hurricane High School last month. Now, we have other pictures here as well, 6.6 through 6.3, or for this one, because this is talking about the latest details of this. And it says, according to a police department news release, members of the FBI, Washington County Bomb Squad, Washington County Sheriff's Office, Washington County School District, and a bomb-detecting canine responded to Pineview at 12:20 on Monday after a student noted a backpack in a common area on campus that appeared to be smoking. The student notified a teacher and the school resource officer on duty. It says here, quote, after examining the device, bomb squad members indicated that it had detonated. The device had the if it had detonated, the device had the potential to cause significant injury or death, according to the news release. Pineview was evacuated that afternoon while officials investigated the contents of the backpack and determined it had the potential to cause significant harm, and the device was disarmed. A warrant was eventually executed on the home of the individual in question, who attended classes at Pineview. St. George police discovered materials inside his residence that were consistent with those used to build the device that was placed on Pineview's campus. According to police, it was a failed attempt to detonate a homemade explosive at the school. The search warrant also revealed the student had been researching information about ISIS and promoting the organization online. According to the news release, the Hurricane City Police Department plans to file charges for the suspect's reported involvement in the ISIS-related vandalism on February 15th. As of Tuesday afternoon, the juvenile is being held on the sole charge stemming from the Pineview High School incident. So definitely something to be aware of, that, of course, ISIS, just as it has been trying to do all along, is trying to inspire other people. And of course, this is one more reason why the gospel, the good news of the Lord Jesus Christ and the true Jesus of the Bible, not the Isa of the Quran, is the person who people need to know about. And of course, the gospel needs to get out to many people, not just Muslims, but people throughout the world. And of course, over in Iraq, where they've suffered a whole lot of devastation from ISIS, I have here from National Public Radio, months after ISIS, much of Iraq's Mosul is still in rubble. Ziad Abdul Qadar came back to his house in the Iraqi city of Mosul recently to find a pile of charred human bones in the courtyard. He'd seen the bodies of the two ISIS fighters when he came to check on the house months ago and hurriedly left. When he returned in mid-February, they had been set on fire. A group was going around burning bodies because they were worried about disease, he says. He plans to shovel the bones into a bag and throw it into the trash. The macabre pile is just another obstacle for the former shop owner, struggling to repair his damaged home 8 months after the U.S.-backed Iraqi forces drove ISIS from Mosul. If some of the city's residents initially welcomed ISIS and its promise of good governance when it took over Iraq's second biggest city 4 years ago, that dissipated as the regime became increasingly more brutal. It's difficult to find anyone who speaks well of them now. Although it says, people come here and spit on the bones, says Abdul Qadar, standing next to his 11-year-old son. We suffered a lot under ISIS. When he and his family tried to leave Mosul last May after they ran out of food, ISIS fighters caught them, took their money, jewelry, and documents, and whipped them with rubber hoses. They took away his 24-year-old son after finding a banned cell phone among his things. Abdul Qadar hasn't heard from him since then. So, as you know, it continues to be an ongoing rebuilding process now, even though ISIS is not in this area. Everything is destroyed. I mean, things are being rebuilt. You know, shown pictures of new libraries that are being built and are once again filled with books, and other places that are being rebuilt. But there's a whole lot still more to do. So continue to be in prayer for Christians in the Middle East and anyone who was affected by ISIS and all of the work that they did over all of that time. Moving on to another part of Iraq, I have here biggest stadium in the world with a capacity of 135,000 people to be built in Iraq as a present from Saudi Arabia's king. It says here, the massive ground is a present from Saudi Arabian royalty after Iraq beat the nation 4-1 in a recent friendly match. It says the 135,000-seater ground has been given the go-ahead after Iraq beat the nation 4-1 in a recent friendly match. Prior to the game, King Salman promised to build Iraq a stadium if they ran out winners on February the 28th. The match was the first full international played on home soil since the 1990 invasion of Kuwait that sparked an international embargo. Despite being massive underdogs, the Iraqi 11 ran out comprehensive winners thanks to 2 goals. Mohammad Ali, one from Imad Mohsen Majid, and a Saeed Awad Al-Yami own goal. Saudi Arabia themselves have qualified for the summer's World Cup in Russia, while Iraq missed out. With King Salman clearly confident during the political discussion, he promised Iraq's Prime Minister Haider al-Abadi he would build the ground should they win. Al-Abadi revealed the news saying, quote, I have received a phone call from the King of Saudi Arabia, Salman bin Abdul Aziz. He hailed Iraqi's victory in the recent match. He expressed his preparedness and commitment to expanding positive relations between Iraq and Saudi Arabia at different levels: economical, commercial, communal, cultural, at all levels that are of interest for the two countries. Moving on here, I have a whole lot of persecution news. A lot of this is from World Watch Monitor. The first one, Algerian pastor decries church closure. The leader of a Protestant church in Algeria's northwestern town of Ain Turk has denounced the closure of his church 4 months ago. Yusuf Al-Ramain founded the House of Hope Church more than 20 years ago in 1997, but on November the 9th, 2017, the local authorities closed down the church, claiming it had been used to illegally print gospels and publications intended for evangelism. The police notification also stated that the church didn't have state approval. But Al-Ramain, speaking on video, shared with World Watch Monitor and said the closure of the church was based on a false accusation. And yes, we do have that video as well. So go ahead and check this video out right now.
Good morning, everyone, from Algeria, from our town, Ain Turk. My name is Yusuf Al-Rahman. I am the founder of the ministries of the House of Hope Fellowship and Ministries. Actually, this ministry has been founded back in 1997. And actually, by the next month, which is December 2017, we will complete 20 years of ministry. God has done an amazing work through this house and through this ministry. Thousands of believers went through this house. Hundreds and hundreds were baptized here in this house. Many camps, seminars, and training programs went through this house. The Timothy School also was founded here. And it's amazing how many pastors and leaders and evangelists and church planters and servants has been raised from this house. God has given visions, dreams, and in an amazing way that God has led so many people from this house. And we are very thankful to what God has been done. Unfortunately, the enemy has not been happy. All these years has been trying by all means to stop us, to slow us, to hinder the work. And back actually on the 9th of November this month, 2017, the governor of Oran has issued an order to close down the church and to stop all the ministries in this house. And all this order has been based in false accusations. But we believe that God is in control. He will not allow any hair to fall without his will from our hair. But I am deeply convinced that God is going to bless us and continue the work in this house because he has promised to be with us all the time till the end of the age. Please pray for us. Mobilize others to praise because together we work for his glory and the honor and the extent of his kingdom in Algeria and beyond. Thank you, and God bless you.
Is also from World Watch Monitor, says Algeria government denies church closures are discrimination. It says here the Algerian Minister of Religious Affairs has denied discriminating against the country's Christian minority by ordering the closure of several churches in recent months. The latest church closures took place last week as 2 churches were sealed by police in the northwestern city of Oran. A week beforehand, 2 more churches received a notification to close in the eastern city of Tizi Ouzou, while in November another church was closed down in Ain Turk, 15 kilometers from Oran. Mohammed Aissa told Inohar TV that the churches, quote, did not meet the standards required of a place of worship. The institutions that were closed have been closed down because they were built without complying with the regulations of the Republic, he said, adding that if a building lacks emergency exits, it must be closed, even if it is a mosque. When a place of worship is built without any notice showing it's a place of worship, which may enable the state to protect it, this place must be closed, he added. In response, a spokesperson from the Protestant Church of Algeria told World Watch Monitor, quote, the government is simply implementing the 2006 law of regulating non-Muslim worship. This law is a sword of Damocles suspended above the churches. It is the legal instrument that the government uses to silence the church. The purpose of this law is to precisely curb the activities of churches and to control them. The content of this law focuses on the coercive side, conviction and sanction. In 2006 law was not aimed at helping Christian communities to comply with standards or to regularize themselves, added the spokesperson, who did not wish to be named. There's no surprise here whatsoever. We do have to take a short commercial break, but when we come back, more persecution news from around the world.
Trinity Channel will have a fundraiser March 12th through the 16th. We will include topics of apologetics, discussing interfaith dialogues, gospel, and many more topics. Some of the guests will be Pastor Bill Hostler, Usama Dadouk, Pastor Joseph, Dr. Jay Smith, Pastor Vance, Joe Carey, C.L. Edwards, and Tony Garule. Join our guests in supporting Trinity in our March fundraiser, March 12th through the 16th. ABN Set TV Ministries is now a part of Amazon Smile. This means that any purchase you make on their website, Amazon will donate 2% of your total purchase to ABN with no additional cost to yourself. All you have to do is sign up at smile.amazon.com, and after you signed in to your regular Amazon account, just search for our ministry by typing Aramaic Broadcasting Network. Then click Select next to our name, and you're all set to support us. Set up your Amazon Smile account today by selecting Aramaic Broadcasting Network as the group you want to donate to. Be a part of Amazon Smile and help ABN Set TV Ministries grow by having Amazon donate to us whenever you make a purchase on their website.
Friends, welcome back to Islam and the News. And of course, it wouldn't be Islam and the News if we didn't have a whole list of persecution news from around the world. Yes, as usual, Christians being persecuted because they are Christians, because they follow the true Lord Jesus Christ who we find in the New Testament. And of course, he was hated, and he told his disciples, he told his followers that they would be hated as well. And this is definitely the case. But we've heard many missionaries and many people say the blood of the martyrs is the seed of the church. We see how the truth continues to spread despite the persecution. And starting off here from World Watch Monitor, in Uzbekistan, religious freedoms not recognized in law and practice. Law changes and a strong political will are needed if Uzbeks are to freely practice their faith, according to the UN Special Reporter on Freedom or Religion or Belief. Ahmad Shahid presented his findings on the 2nd of March to the Human Rights Council as it meets for its 37th session in Geneva, Switzerland on the 23rd of February to the 26th of March. His report follows an official visit to Uzbekistan in October of 2017, after which he said the country should invest more time protecting religious freedoms in its ongoing reforms rather than seeing religion as a threat. Shahid says extremism came up in almost every conversation he had with officials during his visit, and that often extremism was described by the authorities as the main challenge facing the country. He concludes that believers have to carefully navigate the boundaries for practicing their religions or beliefs, or they risk being accused of stirring religious intolerance, or worse, identified with spreading extremism. World Watch Monitor reported in 2017 some of Uzbekistan's violations against Christians, including a police raid on a congregation of 27 Protestants, where some female members were assaulted, in the case of Tohar Haydarov, a Christian convert who served 6 years in prison on alleged fabricated drug charges after his relatives asked the police to help them force Haydarov to return to Islam. Shahid acknowledges efforts made by the new president, Shavak Mirziyoyev, government to review its human rights records, such as the reforms in its 2017 to 2021 action strategy, and commends the president on accommodating all his requests and giving him unimpeded access to various institutions, including Jazlik Prison, which Human Rights Watch says is well known for its harsh conditions and its ill treatment and torture of religious prisoners. Moving on, though, to India, I have here 6 Christians injured following Hindu attack over baby's burial. 6 Christians were badly injured in a house torched in an attack by Hindu extremists in the eastern Indian state of Odisha following the death and burial of a Christian baby. The incident occurred on the 27th of February in Tangagadu, a town in Malkangiri district where 3 Christian families lived alongside 35 Hindu families, a local source told World Watch Monitor. After one of the Christian families lost their 2-year-old daughter, they prepared for her burial but were opposed by Hindus who demanded that the girl be buried outside the village, the source said. The bereaved family explained to them that they would bury the child on land they owned, the source said, but the Hindus reportedly only allowed them go ahead after they paid them the equivalent of around $80 in American dollars. It says here, World Watch Monitor was told that the same night after they had buried the little girl, approximately 30 Hindu extremists arrived at their home and set it on fire. While the mother, Debbie Nandi, was able to escape, her husband, Sukra Markhami, and their other daughter, who was 12 years old, Savitha, were beaten and left unconscious. Savitha sustained a critical head injury as well. And moving on to Pakistan, a Christian family attacked for helping build a church wall. Yes, it says here that 5 members of a Christian family in northeast Pakistan were attacked and injured as they helped to build a boundary wall around their church on Sunday. The pastor of the Pakistan Gospel Assemblies Church in Yusufwala village on the outskirts of the Punjabi city of Sahiwal told World Watch Monitor that around 20 armed men attacked the church members as they built the wall ahead of the Sunday morning service. Our church elder, George Massey, who was 70, was overseeing masons and laborers who were constructing the wall. We were praying inside the church when we heard shouting and yelling, and when we rushed outside, we saw about 20 men armed with clubs and axes who were beating Massey and others, said the pastor, who cannot be named for security reasons. He said he believed the men were linked to a local landlord. The land was originally Charaga, which means dedicated for communal purposes. However, the pastor said they had obtained permission to build the church on the land 3 years ago. It says, quote, that legal agreement is documented and we have a copy of it, he said, adding the agreement included church-related infrastructure such as a boundary wall. George Massey's son, Babar, 22, who was wounded with an axe during the attack, told World Watch Monitor from hospital telephone that his father had struggled for years to get the land to which the church was built dedicated for use by the church. It says the attackers told us to stop building the wall as the land belonged to them, but we told them that it belongs to the church. At this, they descended into fighting with us. Then our women tried to intervene, but they too were beaten and their clothes were torn, he said. In Pakistan, tearing a woman's clothes and outraging her modesty, quote unquote, is a jailable offense. Another of George Massey's sons, William, was also injured, as was his daughter, Nasreen, and daughter-in-law, Jamila. The pastor said he had asked the local police station to provide security for the church, but they had not done so. It would have been different if the church had been provided full security, he said. The wall was later completed under police supervision. So we can thank the Lord for that. Moving on to Colombia, speaking of women who are, of course, impacted in a huge way when they're living under Islam, or even are relatives of people who are trying to be Islamic as they can be and follow Muhammad's life to a T. It says here from Colombia, from Central America here, Central America, South America, this isn't the Middle East, says the hashtag, of course, me too, of Christian women and girls. If Christian women in Colombia could decide on a hashtag, it could be, of course, me too. Many of them also experience sexual violence, facing extra vulnerability because of their religion as well as their gender. Soraya, 15, and her family belong to one of the 4 tribes that form the indigenous community of approximate 30,000 people in the Sierra Nevada de Santa Marta, an isolated mountainous region in northern Colombia. Here, teenage girls as young as 14 are forced to marry men who maintain their indigenous beliefs to make the girls forget about their Christian religion, according to the Christian charity Open Doors International. The area where Soraya lives forms a spiritual and political center of traditional Ahuka culture that sees itself as responsible for maintaining, quote, the balance of the universe. The tribe's indigenous beliefs and traditions involve rituals and witchcraft, and every member is expected to join in. About 9 months ago, Soraya and another girl, Hernan, 14, were summoned to a hearing by indigenous leaders where the girls were asked to distance themselves publicly from their Christian faith. It was meant to give them an opportunity to be accepted back into the community without the further threats and punishment in the form of detention, torture, or, in the case of the young girls like Soraya and Hernan, being forced to marry an indigenous man who still practiced the tribe's belief. Despite this, the children and their parents refused and left the indigenous community to find safety in a shelter. While Soraya was able to escape to a safe house with her family, most indigenous girls cannot. Now, of course, more details in that news story, but I have more to move on to. I have here Christian women at double risk of persecution because of gender as well as religion. For the first time ever, the persecution of women as it differs to that of men has been examined by the analysis of the 2018 World Watch List. The list, compiled by Open Doors International researches over 50 countries where it is most difficult for Christians to live. The resulting gender profiles of persecution reveals a striking multi-layered exploitation of Christian women's structural vulnerabilities, and they are exposed to nearly twice as many persecuting factors as Christian men. 83% of women around the world identify with a faith group compared with 79% of men. Other research shows that of all faiths, Christianity is the most persecuted religious group. 215 million Christians experience high, very high, or extreme levels of persecution, according to Open Doors. And according to Pew Research, the global church in 2010 was estimated at about 31% of the world population, with Muslims coming in second at about 23%. This year, World Watch List researchers explored and listened to feedback that few, even in the global church, want to acknowledge, that the complex pressures Christian women regularly experience come at them in the ugliest of forms, and they don't look the same as the ones Christian men face. The sheer number of common, quote-unquote, pressures spontaneously listed by women relative to men is almost overwhelming. In contexts where women are already disadvantaged, Christian women are specifically and most frequently targeted by three coercion tactics: forced marriage, rape, and other forms of sexual violence. Compellingly, Christian men reported an entirely different mix of pressures. Their top three all related to work: military/militia, conscription, and physical violence, non-sexual. Therefore, no overlap exists between the most prevalent gendered experiences of pressure to abandon one's faith. But whatever form it takes, the ultimate goal of all gendered persecution is to destroy local Christian communities, as evidenced by a detailed report on the subject published after the kidnap of the Chibok girls in 2014. And of course, this is something that is an ongoing thing that we see in different countries, third world countries around the world, and there's no one to speak up for them. And here on Islam in the News, we're letting people know around the world, regardless of where you are, what's happening to Christians in other parts of the world, people who are completely out of sight, out of mind. Islam in the News is your Islamic news source where we talk about these things, which will never be talked about in the mainstream media. I have here also from Kyrgyzstan, Baptists repair church after arson attack. An arson attack on a small Baptist church in Kyrgyzstan has not deterred the congregation from meeting. The 40 Kurds and Russian members of the church feared for their safety when attackers set fire to their church on the 2nd of January. They were told by police that the attack was organized by those who don't like your church and Christianity in the midst of a Muslim country. Members of the church in Kajase, a small town in the Asik-Kul region that borders China, were later told that opposition to the burial of a Protestant man in a nearby village could have led to the attack. But over the last 2 months, the parishioners have continued to meet on Sundays in the fire-damaged building, as well as meeting for Bible studies at each other's homes. The enemy, quote-unquote, wants to frighten us through that fire, but it didn't work. The Christians of Kajase started to meet for prayer, worship, and Bible study more often than before, even though it is very uncomfortable in the burned building, one of the church members told World Watch Monitor. The church members are cleaning up and repairing their building, which one of the church leaders said is almost done. Moving on to Kaduna, I have here bloody clashes in Kaduna. His Christian youths resist dating and conversion of Christian girls. Clashes over the forceful conversion of Christian girls to Islam has left 12 people dead in Nigeria's northwestern state of Kaduna. Several others sustained injuries from gunshots and machetes, while dozens of shops, houses, and vehicles were set ablaze in the Kasuwan Magani community of Kajuru local government area. The violence erupted on the 26th of February following allegations that Muslim boys were dating Christian girls and converting them to Islam and eventually marrying them. Abdul Wahab Jibo, a local Muslim youth, said tension had been growing between Muslim and Christian youths for 2 weeks before the clash. Jibo alleged that the authorities had been informed about the looming crisis, but that nothing was done to avert it. He also blamed Christian youths for what followed, saying, "There are Muslim boys that are dating Christian girls. Some of the girls dating the Muslim boys got converted to Islam, but the brothers of the one of the girls, this is what it says here, who converted and married a Muslim boy, opposed the marriage and went to the residence of the Muslim boy to take her away. The Muslim boys in the area resisted attempts to forcefully take the girl, and a fight ensued. A Christian youth, Sonny Issa, confirmed the existing tensions and said Muslim boys had insulted Christians. They called us infidels, he said. They also said we are poor, and that's why they date our girls and convert them to Islam and marry them. These insults and humiliation from the Muslim boys has been going on for long, so we decided to constitute a committee to stop our girls from dating Muslims, since Muslim girls are even prohibited from dating Christians. And then moving on to Africa, Central African Republic, church elder among 6 aid workers hacked to death. A church elder who worked for UNICEF was one of 6 people killed during a recent ambush by armed men in the northern Central African Republic. Gabriel Oli, 66, was an elder at a Baptist church in Bangui, the capital. He was among a group of 6 workers, including 2 officials from the Ministry of Education and 3 members of a local group that works with UNICEF, traveling to the northwestern town of Markaunda near the Chad border on the 25th of February when the car was ambushed. Some of the victims were shot dead. Others had their throats slit. Their car was also torched, and local sources were, of course, told about this afterwards. Ola is survived by a wife and 7 children. It says, we strongly condemn the senseless act against our aid workers who were there to improve the lives of the most vulnerable populations. This was said by UNICEF themselves. We offer our deepest condolences to the families and the colleagues of the victims. School is the key to developing a country, and any attack against teachers is a crime against the education of our children. Moving on to Europe, persecution doesn't stop. When you leave the Middle East, when you leave countries that are under Sharia, when you leave areas that aren't under Sharia but have a high Muslim population to the point where they do either you are in control or try to take control, or at least have a big influence, and of course are trying to Islamize their area, regardless of what part of the world it is. I have here from National Review Online, in Sweden, Christians fleeing persecution face violence all over again. Germany saw nearly 100 anti-Christian attacks in 2017. The most violent incidents occurred among asylum seekers in refugee homes, and German politicians expressed growing concern for the safety of Christians fleeing to Europe. Open Doors Deutschland, which supports and advocates for persecuted Christians, recorded 743 incidents in 2016. After a wave of violence against Christians in refugee homes, many of them asked repeatedly for separate accommodation, except in a few cases, authorities failed to respond. Now, this is an ongoing thing. This is not just in Sweden. I have here exclusive, this is from Breitbart London, tiny Irish town taking hundreds of migrants had no say, locals fear being called racist. A resident of a tiny Irish town having its population increased by a third by a new migrant center has said Ireland has become a slave state, quote unquote, of the European Union and its immigration policies, leaving locals helpless. We don't know where these people are going to be from. They won't tell us what countries they're from, what religion they're from, said Michael Walsh. He said the 300-strong rural community of Lisdoonvarna could be radically changed by such a large and sudden influx, and that many concerned locals were fearful of accusations of racism if they questioned it. Now, this is the whole thing that people in the West need to realize. Look, if you're afraid of being called a name, if you're being afraid of being called racist when Islam's not even a race to begin with, this whole political correctness, don't offend anybody, is exactly what's being implemented in Europe. It's exactly what CARE and the political Islamists are doing here in the United States as well, trying to make you feel bad because you're educated about Islam and because you, critique it, because you critique Islam, the Quran or Muhammad or whatever. We have freedom of speech, freedom of religion. Now, they use these laws and liberties against us, and we see here in the European Union and different European countries what is happening due to this political correctness. And I believe I actually have other pictures with this one as well, because not only here do we have it in Sweden, but we have Ireland. And this is from BNI. It says, Ireland suicide watch, tiny town forced to take in hundreds of Muslim invaders out of fear of being called racist, even though Islam is not a race. Ireland has announced that it plans to import 1 million more migrants by the year 2040. Many or most from Muslim countries. The current population of Ireland is just 4,790,245 as of Wednesday, March 7th, 2018, based on the latest United Nations estimates. Can you imagine what 1 million more mostly Muslim migrants will do to the country? Now, if you look at a country that is only 4 million people, close to 5 million, and then bring in 1 million immigrants from other countries who have a completely different worldview, yes, you're going to have issues there. And actually, just to give you an example of this, we actually have a video here of some, let me see what they are here, to give you some exact wording, and the technician can get this video ready. It says here, Ireland asylum seekers. That's what these people are. Let's go ahead and check out the video now.
Video, look. You touch me, you touch me. You your man enough, aren't you? Aren't you? I'm here now, do something. I'm here. You wanna do something, yeah? You try to just do something. Do something. Do something up with you big. Do something. Do something, boy. You wanna do something? Yeah? Or you gonna do something though? You gonna do something because you're talking in here. Yeah, you gonna do nothing, you are. You're gonna do nothing, man. You're gonna do it. You see what I'm waiting for you. I'm waiting for you to do something. You're gonna do what I'm gonna do. Come to me now. I'm a dog. True man, no. Fire on battles, man. Fire on battles, man. Coward. Come and go. You're a coward. Yeah, do something. I'll show you that. I will use Irish yourself to do it. Take care. Irish yourself, that's what I will use for you. Yeah, come in here now. We are going in. Don't touch me. Don't put your hands on me. Don't put your hands on me. That one is not finished. I'll come and break it. I'll go inside and I'll store it. I know there's a video. I've got my own video on the house as well. I have my own video. You touch me, man. I swear to God, man. You talk to me. When it comes to the right proper things, yeah? Do something. Look how old you are. How old you are. You are supposed to be on your bed now, drinking tea. Drinking a cup of tea, as old as you are.
Sorry, I can't hear you.
I
said as old as you are. You're supposed to be sitting in your parlor down, drinking tea. You are struggling with young ones. Fuck's sake.
Do it now. Do it now.
Fuck's sake. Daniel, go on. Let's leave them. Daniel, let's leave them. We are going to show them in 2 minutes. Look at the old people. Look at the 3 old men. Just struggling with the young ones.
It's this raw video out of Ireland, and guess what? Christianity is dead for the most part in Europe. Obviously, there are some great preachers there who are preaching the Word of God faithfully in spite of what is happening. And here is one of them here. The story at least falls right in line with that narrative. This is from the American Conservative. It says, Christian Life in Exile. This is number 22. Last week, I wrote a post in which I spotlighted a warning from the Reverend Peter Sunlan, a young vicar in the evangelical wing of the Church of England, highlighting his warning that faithful Orthodox Christians with the Church of England are going to have to found congregations outside the official church if the faith is going to survive the deluge. Go ahead, technician, go ahead and go to number 22. It says here, he wrote, I am begging you to pray that if there's a catastrophic spiritual ruin ahead of us, that God would open our eyes to it before it is too late. If you have not been praying with the heartfelt sincerity and desperate dependence on God, start tonight. Dr. Sonlon, who is vicar of St. Mark's Church of England and rector of Emmanuel Anglican Church, agreed to an email interview with me about his views. The transcript is as follows: strongly encourage U.S. Christians to pay close attention to what he says. What British Christians are living with today, American Christians will almost certainly be living with tomorrow. We have the advantage of time to prepare, though not much of it. Now, I actually want to point you to the website to get the full interview, and that is the American Conservative. That's the name of the website, and the name of the story is Christian Life in Exile. So definitely look that up to get all of the interview from this very, very important story. Moving on to creeping Sharia, I have banned Muslim scholar given visa by Hillary Clinton faces third rape charge and could face charge in the United States. And who is this referring to? None other than Tariq Ramadan, the grandson of Hassan al-Banna, who founded the Al-Ikhwan al-Muslimin, or otherwise known as the Muslim Brotherhood, back in 1928. Yes, about 90 years ago. His grandfather started that very, very successful organization who has front groups here in America as well. And yet here we have his grandson facing another rape charge. And I have talked about this in the past, and this is the latest. It says a third woman accused a prominent Islamic scholar Tariq Ramadan of rape a month after he was indicted over similar charges and reprimanded remanded into custody. Judicial sources told AFP on Wednesday the French Muslim woman, who wants to remain anonymous and uses the pseudonym Marie, claims to have suffered multiple rapes in France, Brussels, and London between 2013 and 2014. She's accused 55-year-old Tariq Ramadan of subjecting her to violent and sexually degrading acts during a dozen meetings, often in hotels at the sidelines of conferences. Marie tried in vain to escape the influence of Mr. Ramadan, who did not stop threatening her, according to a judicial source discussing the period between February 2013 and June 2014. Ramadan, a prominent TV pundit and Oxford University professor whose grandfather founded Egypt's Muslim Brotherhood movement, was detained on the 2nd of February over charges he raped 2 Muslim women in France, which he denies. French authorities ordered Ramadan to be placed in custody after he was charged, judging him a flight risk. His lawyers unsuccessfully proposed handing over his Swiss passport, bail of 50,000 euros or 62,000 American dollars, and daily check-ins at a police station to secure his release. A professor of contemporary Islamic studies at Oxford, Ramadan has been on leave since November after the allegations emerged. Now, moving here to the United States, I have here from Creeping Sharia, New York. Muslim firefighter who threatened to kill colleagues will have charges dropped. It says here, criminal charges against a firefighter who allegedly threatened to kill colleagues he claimed had mistreated him over his religious faith will be dropped in 6 months if he stays out of trouble and continues mental health treatment. Rahim Hassan's case was adjourned in contemplation of dismissal during his appearance Wednesday in criminal court. Hassan, 30, a Staten Island resident, was arrested on December 27th, and accused of making a threatening call to his supervising officer at a Dongan Hills home on December 20th, said a criminal complaint. "This is Hassan. I'm going to kill the guys in the firehouse," the suspect said, according to the complaint. Hassan worked for the officer for about 4 years, and the supervisor recognized his voice, the complaint said. Moving on to Wisconsin, also from Creeping Sharia, perp arrested in mosque burglary, care blamed on Islamophobia, guess what? Was a Muslim. It says here, police are looking into 2 recent burglaries at the Islamic Society of Green Bay, while a possible motive for the crimes is being rejected. The Green Bay Police Department says the first burglary took place January 23rd. The victim reported $1,000 in currency was taken, according to the police captain. The second burglary happened sometime between February 2nd and February 3rd. There's no information that officers learned about or that the victims reported any correlation to the motive of why this occurred. During a press conference on Monday, a top official with the Council on American Islamic Relations Minnesota chapter talked about the criminal activity. CAIR's announcement was that they had planned to file a complaint with the U.S. Equal Opportunity Employment Commission over the firing of 7 Muslim workers. But Captain Walsh denies there's anything to that allegation. The incident appears isolated. We have no motive. We have no connection to believe it has anything related to Aryans. However, like the majority of cases terror-linked CAIR is involved with, they turn out to be blatantly false allegations and fake news. A Muslim was arrested for robbing this mosque. So this continues to happen, and we continually see CAIR, the Council on American Islamic Relations, a organization that has been labeled a terrorist group by Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, and Egypt, openly working here in the United States. And they are trying to play themselves off as a human rights organization when really they're just using the same old 90-year-old tactics that the Muslim Brotherhood has been using since Hassan al-Banna founded it back in 1928. Yes, you need to get informed about Islam, not Islam according to your American Constitution-loving, Bill of Rights-loving Muslim neighbor or coworker or classmate, but Islam according to Muhammad, because he defines Islam just as Christianity is defined by Jesus Christ. And the true Jesus Christ, not the Isa of the Quran, the true Jesus of Nazareth, the Jew who we read about in the New Testament, is the person who all people, including Muslims, need to know about. You need to share the gospel with your Muslim neighbors. If we don't, well, who will? No one will. We are God's instrument to share the gospel, to proclaim the gospel, and defend the historic Christian faith to all those who need to know and understand it. Go out and love your Muslim neighbors enough to share the truth with them. The truth is what they need, and the truth will set them free. We'll see you next Friday here on ABN Stream Channel for another episode of Islam and the News.